Welcome to the Spark It podcast, where we bring you inspiring conversations that spark your interest to do more or keep the conversation going. And today we will delve into a powerful history of resilience and activism as we explore the pivotal role of Kenyan women in protests, from the courageous spirit of Mekatilili Menza to the modern day voices that are shaping change. Join us as we uncover the stories of strength and determination in shaping Kenya's history through protest. I'm your host, Helen Kimaru, and today we are going to be looking at the role of women in Kenya's protest. So, the first person we are going to be highlighting is Mekatilili Menza. I really want us to focus on way back. Mekatilili was born in the 1840s and she became involved in the struggle for independence for her people around 1912. And Mekatilili is often referred as a freedom fighter of the Giriama people. She was an only daughter in a family of five kids, and one of her brothers was captured by Arab slave traders. The British at some point imposed a hard tax on the Giriama people, and this definitely did not sit well with Mekatilili Wamenza. So, when she started fighting for her people or protesting against the British government. She was, I think, in her 70s, and she started leading the people against the British. The British, and she would use sacred songs. They call them Kifudu Giriama funeral dance, and these she would use to rally people to take oaths to resist the British. And at one point, from what I have gathered online, Mekatilili Wamenza went to an event where a British colonialist was invited, and she went with a chicken and chicks, and she asked the person to pick one of the chicks, and the chicken decided to bite the guy. And what happens is Mekatilili Wamenza tells this person, you see, this is exactly what will happen to you. You cannot take any more of our sons. And from this very incident, Mekatilili Wamenza was imprisoned in Kisii, and later she was released, and according to history, she walked all the way, as a Kenyan, if you know, all the way from Kisii to the Kenyan coast. That's a very, very big distance, honestly. And some people say it's around 700 kilometers or so. But you can imagine somebody making such a trip at such a time. I don't know. Right now, we can't even walk 5 kilometers without feeling like we are exhausted. So I can imagine how far she went for this to happen. Mekatilili Wamenza sort of, I would say, set pace for resistance for women here in Kenya. And over the years, a lot of women have shown resistance, and they have played a big role as activists here in Kenya. And looking back, women have sort of been part of the process and a backbone, fighting for their communities, for their families, for their villages and stuff like that. And the other people I wanted us to highlight is the Mau Mau. My grandmother was born in 1916, and my grandmother died in 2006. And my grandmother, growing up, she used to give us stories of the Mau Mau and how the Mau Mau was fighting for Kenyans, or for Kenya's independence. And I remember this one particular story she told us about how when the British government set root here in Kenya, how they were actually displaced and sent to different places. Being from the Kikuyu community, my grandmother, they were sent to the Rift Valley, and this was because their land, which is in central Kenya, part of their land was occupied by the British colonialist, and that is how some of them ended up being sent to different places, either to become squatters. And if you look at the history of Kenya, there is you would find, for example, different communities, maybe from specific regions, you'd find them like sort of displaced, whether they became squatters or something like that, because their land was grabbed. So another group of people that actually did lots of activism according to Kenya's history books. And honestly, as I talk about this, I would like you guys to engage us in our comment sections, whether on YouTube, on TikTok, wherever you, or even on all the podcasting platforms that you listen from. Please let us know about women in your community who maybe we might have not have highlight in this episode, who have actually been the face of activism or protests in your communities, and that has made a big change. So during the Mau Mau uprising, the Kikuyu women played a huge role in the Mau Mau uprising. The British government, after they occupied Kenya, they distributed land to the white settlers, and especially in the highlands. And this is information I've gotten from Gender Security Project. The largest number of the colonized peasantry in Kikuyu land were women, and these women were particularly instrumental in implementing the Haridhuku disturbances, a phenomenon that also carried forward the Mau Mau rebellion. So this particular source says that most Mau Mau freedom fighters operated from the forest and mountainous region. And when the colonial government began to crack down on them, access to their villages became difficult. And as a result, supplies and provisions to sustain themselves became challenging. Each locality had women leaders covering several villages, and they worked alongside the men who served as commanders in their areas. Their homes were the base from which Mau Mau operations in the reserves were organized. So these Kikuyu women featured prominently in the organizational network between the fighters in the forest and the reserves, and they formed a core part of the Mau Mau, particularly in holding and maintaining supply lines. Their identities as women helped them avoid suspicion, and they moved about through colonial spaces between the Mau Mau hideouts and the strongholds, and delivered vital supplies such as services to guerrilla fighters, including food, ammunition, medical care, and of course information. So women actually, during the Mau Mau rebellion or uprising, women served such a big role because um, the colonial government would not suspect women in this case, according to the history that I have actually read about the Mau Mau fight. So women became very instrumental in ensuring that these people are fed, these people have ammunition. I don't remember, there was a documentary I was watching, I have forgotten, but there was this particular woman I saw they had highlighted that she would get work in different settlers' homes, and she would steal their guns. She would steal their guns and load them up somewhere, and then supply these guns to the Mau Mau fighters, and that kept the kept them like sort of armed. Yeah, so one of the very prominent women in this particular fight was Field Marshal Mudhoni Kirima, and for her, according to sources, she actually avoided capture for 11 years, and she was hiding in the forest of central Kenya, and was the only woman who was able to reach the status of field marshal in the Mau Mau. This is a quote by Kenya Times. Yes, so Field Marshal Mudhoni, I think a few years ago, I saw her on TV getting her locks were being shaved, the locks that she had during the Mau Mau fight. Sorry. Yeah. So, Mau Mau, the women who fought in the Mau Mau fight, like I would say they did an amazing job. And this also goes back to uh when it comes to Kenya's independence, I believe it was not only fought by the Mau Mau. All communities fought for Kenya's independence in their own way. And I believe women played such a big role because the same women were the ones who are being left at home to fend for their children and to do all these things like to take care of a home when their men were at war and stuff like that. So over the years, women have played such a key role in protests, in activism, and sometimes I kind of feel like sometimes maybe their voices might, maybe the books, history books might have overlooked them, or their voices might not have been documented, especially in the past. And right now that might be changing a little bit because we live in an era where people are documenting everything, whether on their smartphones, on camera, and and we have, of course, all these social media. So you can clearly see the digital footprint of any activism that occurs because a woman has participated. Yeah. So and then the other key figure I would want us to focus on, and for this one I was really interested because it's somebody that through my lifetime I got to experience her work and her impact, and this definitely is Wangari Maathai. So I did a little bit more research into Wangari Maathai, and Wangari Maathai was a social, environmental, and political activist, and she started the green belt movement in 1977, which is a non-profit that was focused or has been focused on planting trees, environmental conservation, and women rights. She also won a Nobel Peace Prize and became the first African woman to do so in 2004. So you can imagine, for her to get to be recognized in such a scale means like whatever her work was, or whatever the footprint she left, her legacy, it means she had already done amazing things. And as I was looking at the work of Wangari Maathai, I was really amazed at how far or how much she did in terms of activism for the democracy of Kenya, in terms of activism for the environment, for women rights. I feel like she's an embodiment of what true activism looks like. And even for me, as I talk about this, I'm sort of inspired to do more for my community in that context. So Wangari Maathai, she started her activism, according to Wikipedia, between the years of 1972 and 1976. And at this point, she was working at the University of Nairobi as a senior lecturer. At this point, she was championing for women to get like equal benefits, just like the men in those careers. And another milestone for her was in 1989, there was a plan to construct a story building called Kenya Times Media Trust Complex in Uhuru Park. For those people who don't know about Uhuru Park is a park that is actually located in the central business district here in Nairobi. And this park is a recreational park for Kenyans. When I look at where it's kind of positioned, and if it didn't exist right now, I feel like Kenyans would be missing out on a lot, because at this point people go there to chill, to hang out, and do a lot of amazing things. So in 1989, Moi's government wanted to create or to construct a 60-story building that would serve like different government offices and stuff like that. So Wangari Maathai took it upon herself to write letters. She wrote letters to the president. She wrote letters to the Minister of Environment. She wrote letters to Kenya Times. She also wrote letters to Sir John Johnson, who was the British High Commissioner in Nairobi at the time. She wrote letters to UNESCO. All these letters were in protest of this construction of this particular building, because she felt that this was public land and it deserved to just continue being what it was. Because the moment you build such a kind of building there, that means, as I said, we would not be having Uhuru Park as it is. So the government at the point termed her as a crazy woman, and Parliament claimed that some of the members, because Wangari Maathai was this woman who would recruit other women to help her in this movement. And at some point, the government and people in government claimed that the Greenbelt movement members were a bunch of divorcees. Do you see how that looks like? You are here, you are trying to fight for the rights of the people, the good of the people, but the government itself is fighting you. And I think in the 90s, to be termed as a divorcee must have felt like a failure. I think like right now, even right now in Kenya, I think divorce is one of those things that is not looked at in good light. So I would say for people to think of you like a bunch of divorcees means it was supposed to be sort of like a derogatory kind of thing. And Moi at the time said that those who are opposed to this construction had insects in their heads. Oh my God. This is, I don't know. Wangari Maathai was tenacious. That's what I would say. She was tenacious. And in 1992, in January, she was arrested. She was arrested on allegation of spreading rumors about a coup. And after her release, she went to Huru Park in what now they regard as a freedom corner. And she took part on a hunger strike with other women, and they were demanding that the government releases political prisoners. And during this struggle, they spent like 4 days there. Excuse me. They spent 4 days at Uhuru Park on a hunger strike with other women. And on the fourth day, the police showed up and they tried to actually, disperse them. And during this struggle, she became unconscious. She was knocked unconscious, and this became an international thing. Like it drew a lot of criticism from international, people. And Wangari stood behind mothers of political prisoners, and they stripped naked at Uhuru Park in Nairobi. They were protesting the detention without trial of their sons. And later, a year later, the sons were actually released. I don't know. For me, I feel it's the sacrifices that Wangari Maathai had to put up with. Sometimes when I have been looking at the current protests that we have had in Kenya, and I feel like when you go for a protest, I feel like sometimes you might feel like you would give up, but I have realized when I was reading the story of Wangari Maathai, I realized it was the constant protesting, the constant keeping up with what she believed in that sort of brought the change. If at some point she had given up, we would not have Uhuru Park. If at some point she would have given up, maybe the sons of maybe those people who had arrested wrongfully would never have been released. But for her, I think she knew just how much power she had, and she used her voice in the right way, which I feel should be an inspiration for us as young women out here to do more in whatever capacity, because change does not take a day. That's what I am learning from this whole process and from Wangari Maathai. So the demonstrations she initiated under her green belt movement marshaled women all over Kenya to plant trees. And and Wangari Maathai and other women, they did pay a very dear price for the fight to conserve the environment. Yes, Wangari Maathai wasn't just fighting for the environment, she was fighting for democracy. She wanted better. She was involved in the fight for multipartyism. And in 1997, she actually ran for presidency and lost. In 1998, again, there was a plan to privatize large parts of Karura. For those who do not know, Karura Forest is a forest that is just right outside the city. And again, for her, I think at this point protesting is was definitely different from the protesting that we are experiencing right now, because she wrote letters to different government entities, and also she showed up to plant trees despite heavy security. And this protest against this move, it continued for like a year, up to 1999. Yeah, so Wangari Maathai has suffered imprisonment. She's suffered physical and mental anguish. She's clashed with the government on several occasions and business people, and that is how now we have Karura Forest. But I have been watching videos online. Karura Forest, some part of it has been cleared. Some people say they are clearing those trees so that indigenous trees can be planted. I am not sure what exactly is happening in Karura Forest, but what I can say, were it not for the efforts that Wangari Maathai, the women in the Green Belt movement, or the people who really cared in the 90s, again, Karura Forest would have been a thing of the past. So for me, the reason why I have talked about Wangari Maathai sort of in an in-depth manner is because of her resilience. It's because of the passion she had for her work, for what she believed in, and the fact that she knew that change doesn't take a day. And she kept going. She kept doing these things over and over again, whether it's writing to the government, whether it's showing up physically to a protest, whether it's stripping naked somewhere because they needed people to be released from prison, whether it's actually getting arrested. She was not afraid. She was not afraid. And that is one lesson I am learning, and I would love for all of us to take away from the experiences of Wangari Maathai. And now to the business of the day. I would like us to talk about the faces of the Gen Z protest, or the people I believe, in my opinion, are contributing in such a big way. The Gen Z protest has seen a lot of young people, young men and young women, boldly show up to each and every protest all the time, including the one that was recently held here in Kenya on the 25th of June. And it's sad that we did talk about that protest before it happened, and it's sad to note that that people died during this protest. They did document that around 16 people died. It's sad to know that after that protest, women were assaulted, others were raped, and bad things did happen to them. And I feel like this, according, in my opinion, it kind of feels like an intimidation tactic. I watched a lot of videos online about that, people sharing their experiences, how they were groped or grabbed, or, and others definitely getting assaulted and raped at the end of the day. And it kind of felt like, are we really making progress? Where are we headed? At such a time in 2025, you would think this is when that things would be better, but it has not gotten better. And for women, it kind of feels like an intimidation tactic, as if people don't want us to show up and speak up for what is right, or demand for our rights, or demand for action against the different vices. And also, this also goes back to, women have been protesting a lot. There have been protests around end femicide in Kenya. Especially in the last 2 years, I feel like women have really showed up because of the femicide crisis in Kenya. And even before we talk about femicide, I would like to just, probably just as I said, to highlight some of the women that have really shown up. And I'm really proud of this generation of women, and the fact that we are also making our voices count the same way Wangari Maathai, Mekatilili, Menza, the women in the Mau Mau movement, our mothers, the way they have fought for everything that we have right now, the way they have showed up in their lives, even from the family unit. It takes a lot from a woman's angle for this to happen, and for change to happen, and for us to keep championing for what is right. So last year, I was invited to this event by Forum Civ, and I met this girl. She's called Zaha Indumuli. In 2024, during the Gen Z protest, she became very, very much involved in these protests. And when Zaha was given the microphone to share her story, and how she has been participating, or being part of the movement, I listened, and for the first time, I realized just how much or how much it takes from somebody to actively participate, whether it's from organizing to actively showing up, and also the aftermath of a protest. She shared all the dark stories about the people who died last year, how she showed up in funerals, her efforts in online activism, and how many calls she was receiving, or even the threats and stuff like that. It wasn't easy, and it was such an emotional story listening to her. Zaha has been doing amazing with online activism also, and educating people, civic education. So I'll give you your flowers, Zaha. The next person I would like to talk about is Shakira Wafula. Shakira, she became also almost the face of the movement last year during the protest, when she came face to face with a police officer, and there was this picture that was going viral. Shakira also has used her social platforms for civic education. She has shown up in physical protests and done all these amazing things to keep the fire burning and to also advocate for change. And then the other person that I find also very intriguing is Lynn Ngugi. Lynn Ngugi has this huge platform on YouTube, and in the last 2 years, I have seen her speak against all these atrocities. She has hosted guests in on her platform. They have talked about the government, the people in government, the people in the protest, the loss of life. She has covered these particular protests in such a big way and made sure that we have stayed informed. And I am proud of the fact that a woman like Lynn Ngugi is not afraid to use her platform to actually advocate for change and to make sure that the voices of people are heard. And the other person that I find extremely intriguing is Njeri Migwi of Usikime. Njeri Migwi started Usikime, and also this particular organization takes care of gender based violence victims, and she's been doing it for a couple of years now. And she has been doing a great job in protecting the rights of women and their dignity. And in the recent protest, women have been raped, assaulted, among other things, and her organization has been coming through for the victims. I remember watching one of her interviews, and she was talking about how people reached out to her, and at that point even she didn't have like her in-house therapist and psychologist to talk to these people as first responders. So she talks about the fact that she was put in a position where she had to listen to some of the victims who underwent through these traumatic experiences. And when I look at Njeri, I see a resilient woman. I see a woman who puts the needs of other women first. I see a woman who is empathetic. I see a woman who is showing up for women and taking care of women, and giving them a platform and letting them know that the experiences do not define them. She's giving them a voice in such a big way, and I'm really proud of Njeri Migwe. Yes. So another person I would like to acknowledge is Njeri Mwangi, and that is Boniface Mwangi's wife. Njeri Mwangi is an activist herself, and over the years, growing even when I was growing up, I think even when we were in high school, I would see her and Boniface Mwangi show up at protests and all that. She has always almost been at her husband's side. I can imagine being a mother and showing up in this particular protest, and also even your husband is an activist, and they're told that this can take on a person. But Njeri has showed up and done whatever it takes, which is very commendable, because as I have come to realize, these protests can be very traumatizing. And for somebody to go through these things over and over and over again, it means you do believe in the cause you're fighting for. And the other woman I would like to acknowledge, and I know there's a lot of women doing a lot of stuff online out here, and I'm really proud of them, but I'm just mentioning the ones for me that have stood out. The other woman I would like to acknowledge, she has a TikTok page that is called Watch FWWJ. Watch FWWJ. I would say she's one of my favorite content creators. She dissects Kenyan news and issues in a very satirical way, and she gives her voice to the continuous social media, uh, even protests. I like watching her content because she would. She would dissect it in a very satirical way. Like Sha is not working. She would always say something very satirical. Um, so I would say she has made the bad news a bit palatable for me, and I give her flowers for what she does. And then, being a poet myself, I have been in the space of I have been in the scene for a while, and I have come across different poets who are also giving their voices to the movement in the protests, or using their platforms and poetry to advocate for change. And some of the ones I know that I would like to give a shout out to include a spontaneous poet. There is Ka, there is Wangoi Kimani. Yeah, these ladies are doing amazing work out here, and they're using their platforms and their poetry to advocate for social change. So, as you can see, women have been involved in such a big way. And then the other people I would like to give a big shout out to are our mothers who have to sit on the edges of their seats, knowing that you could go to a protest and bad things happen to you and you may not get back home. Like today, I was actually watching the news today, and Diangui, the guy who allegedly had disappeared, and today he showed up in court. I saw his mother and the way she hugged him, and his family and the way they hugged him, the mothers who have to worry. I saw Alberto Juang's mother, I think at the funeral, and the speech she gave and how heartbroken she was. All the women I saw Rex's mother, and during the protest, the day they wanted to lay flowers at parliament buildings, I have seen all these women, the way they're advocating for change in their small way wherever they are. And it kind of gives me hope and reminds me that as women, we need to add our voices, um to let we need to add our voices to the movement. We need to be heard, because whatever it is that we are going through, it affects us. If our children die in a protest, it affects us. A mother losing a child, it affects you. So we all have a role to play, you know even as our mothers wait back at home, wondering whether we are going to get back. All the women in Kenya, they play such a big role, and their voices actually matter. And as I actually uh you know as I actually also look back at the last protest that we had, I am kind of saddened. I am saddened by what happened to the women who were assaulted and stuff like that. Because I had heard in the news, somebody mentioned that there was a plan to take advantage of women during a protest. If this is a way to intimidate women so that they do not add their voices into these protests, I feel like it's such a backward way to do things. I feel like it's time that the government sat with the people and listened. It's time the government thought about the people's needs and also started prioritizing the people. It's time the government sat and thought about the women, because now even when I go back to the particular protest of end femicide in Kenya, femicide cases have been on the rise, especially in the last 2 years. Women die and action is not taken. Women die in their homes. People ask why. Sometimes people ask, where was she? Was she in an Airbnb? What was she wearing? Maybe when she underwent something like rape and stuff like that. And people keep deflecting from the real issues. Women are dying. Women are going through all these things, and that is why women have to show up on the streets to protest the end femicide thing. What is the government really doing to protect its own women? What is the government doing to protect the future? Because the women are the future. Without the women, there is actually no future. We hold the power to bring generations. So I am, as I reflect on all the things that have been happening to Kenya, in Kenya, I mean, I feel like the government needs to do more. And also, I am so encouraged by the fact that women are actually giving their voices into these discussions, whether online. When I go to different social media platforms, and especially somewhere like TikTok, where I see a lot of discussions, women talk about these issues on a daily basis in their small or big way. And they're using social media to advocate for social change, regardless of whether it's unemployment, it's ending femicide, it's bad governance, it's poor roads and stuff like that. So I am really proud of the voices of the women and where we are headed. So this, for me, I would say, is my take on the role of women in the protests. And I feel like they are very, very vital. Their voices need to be heard and we need to listen. So if you have someone you think that they have played such a big role, or even a small role in one way or the other, and you want to give them a shout out, just let us know. Maybe you can comment their names, tag them somewhere on our social media platforms. But I'm really proud of the work of the women and everything they are doing to make their voices heard, because their voices matter. Thank you for listening. It's been the Sparkit podcasts. If this episode inspired you in some way or the other, please share it with somebody in your network and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you so much for contributing to all the discussions on our social media platforms and also following us on the different social media platforms. Um, yes, until the next one. Bye.